guys, it's Kira, and if you couldn't tell already, I bloody love 24-hour readathons. I feel like they just make me read so much more than I normally would, and it's always so fun, particularly to try and like theme them, because I just think it's a lot of fun to try and see how many of a particular type of book you can read in one day, and also to just do some fun seasonal activities as well. So today, which is the 21st of December, it's a Saturday evening, I'm going to be trying to read as many Christmas books as I can in the next 24 hours. So it's currently just before 7 p.m. and I'm going to be starting at exactly 7 o'clock, but we're just going to be doing a lot of fun festive reading. I've got 4 Christmassy themed books lined up that I'm going to be trying to get through, and I'm also just going to be trying to do some fun festive things alongside all of my reading as well. So I've kind of got a bit of a random mixture of books. I've got a YA, I've got a contemporary, some mystery, and also a classic. But the one thing that is connecting them all is the fact that they are all Christmas themed books, and I'm really excited to get into them. But the first one I'm going to be picking up is the one that's probably my most anticipated and has been one that I've wanted to read for a while, and that is Let It Snow, which is by 3 authors, John Green, Lauren Miracle, and Maureen Johnson, and it is a collection of 3 short stories centering around this town where the worst blizzard for like 50 years takes place, and I think it's like 3 separate stories of things that happen in that like situation, but I think they all kind of connect in some way or another. So I'm quite excited for this one because I have not got very high expectations. I don't think it's going to be the best book in the world. I think it is going to be just like a fun, light-hearted, probably romancy themed Christmas book, which I think will be the perfect one to start this readathon with. I also think Jay's parents are going to put on a Christmas film. I'm not sure which one yet, so I think I'm going to sit down, watch a Christmas film, do some reading of Let It Snow, and just get really cozy and enjoy reading this festive book. So I'll catch up with you at 7 o'clock when I start reading. So it is now 9 p.m. and I'm not gonna lie, the first couple of hours of this readathon haven't gone too well because, as I mentioned, we sat down to watch a Christmas film. We ended up watching Deck the Halls, which was really funny. I actually really enjoyed it. I've never seen it before, and we almost watched another one which ended up looking not so good, but then we settled on Deck the Halls and it was so good, so I'm really glad that we watched that. However, the living room was really dark and the film was quite distracting, so I've only read basically about 50 pages of Let It Snow in 2 hours, which is not brilliant, but you know, we'll make it work, it's fine. So far I'm really enjoying it. So as I mentioned, this is a book that's split into 3 short stories. So the first one is called The Jubilee Express, and it's about this girl called Jubilee who is like, basically her Christmas plans are disrupted when her parents get into some kind of like situation, so she has to go and stay with her grandparents for Christmas, only she kind of gets stopped by this massive storm that takes place in this town that they're all from. So that's basically where I'm at so far, but it's an enjoyable story and I'm looking forward to getting more into it because I'm only about halfway into the story so far, so we'll see how it goes. But I've made myself a big mug of Christmas tea, which will hopefully keep me awake, and yeah, I'm just really excited to get into reading properly now. So it's now just before 10 p.m. and I've been reading for about another hour since we finished watching the film, and I managed to finish the first story in Let It Snow. I finished that within about half an hour after getting upstairs, and I definitely enjoyed that one. It was quite a fun story, although the thing with me in short stories is that when I get into one and I really like it, I'm kind of sad that they end so quickly. However, I'm now a little bit into the second story, which is called A Cheer-tastic Christmas Miracle, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not enjoying that story as much so far because it basically just seems to be about a group of guys who go to this Waffle House because there's a group of cheerleaders there. So it's written by John Green, which might give you a little bit of an idea about the sort of way that those boys are written, but yeah, it's not really gripping me as much as the first one so far, but it might get better, so I'm definitely going to carry on. But yeah, it's just like not necessarily as interesting, and in that instance I kind of am always grateful for short stories because it means that even if you don't like a book that much, you don't have to read it for too long. So that's great, but I'm actually getting a little bit tired now and I'm feeling kind of sleepy, so I think it's time for another cup of tea. Okay, so I've literally just been reading for like 5 minutes since I last spoke to you, but just as a case in point of what I was on about with John Green's writing style is that basically, obviously, John Green, if you have read one of his books, you'll know that he writes a very particular type of like female character every single time in one of his books. He always has like the girl that's like different and really desirable and cool and everything, and this short story is no different because this book is written from, or this short story rather, is written from a like boy's perspective, but he's got this friend who is a girl, and what it's just said about her is that she didn't mind yelling or getting yelled at. She was much more like a person than other girls were. Like, I know this book was written quite a while ago, but like John Green really just doesn't write girls very well. Like, I don't know. I'm sure you all understand because like that is just like a ridiculous sentence. But anyway, back to reading, I suppose. So it is just before midnight and I finally finished up reading Let It Snow. I actually managed to come around from my tiredness that came on with reading the second story in the book, because I'm going to be honest, that story was not good in my opinion. I didn't really find myself very invested in those characters, but the first story and the final one, which was called The Patron Saint of Pigs, was actually really good. I think maybe the third story was my favourite because basically it starts out with this girl Addie who is like kind of devastated about a breakup that she's just gone through, but then it also ends up being a little bit more about her kind of going on a bit of a like self-discovery journey and learning to be a little bit less self-absorbed, and I actually really liked that. It was a good story. So yeah, overall I'd probably give this book 3 stars, but the first and third stories were good, but the middle one I just wasn't a fan of, especially the way that it talked about girls and everything was just not for me. But overall it was an enjoyable festive read, and I'm excited to watch the Netflix adaptation probably, I was going to say tomorrow, but technically seeing as it's past midnight it is like today now, so hopefully I'll watch that later on today. But now I'm going to start on my next read for this readathon, which is going to be A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Now this is a tiny book, but obviously it's a classic, so they often like take me a little bit longer to read just because of the writing style, but I'm hoping that maybe I'll be able to blast this out this evening before I go to sleep, or if not, get quite a bit into it, so I'm going to get started on that now. So it's just turned 12:30 and I'm about halfway into A Christmas Carol, which is about 40 pages because this book is 80 pages in total, and so far I'm really liking it. This is a reread for me, but it's been quite a while since I last picked up this book or any Charles Dickens really, but I just really like his writing style. I think it's very like vivid and just really takes you into a like wintry Victorian setting. I know not all of his books are necessarily set at Christmas time or in winter, but I feel like they all just give off that cool weather, cold is the word I'm looking for, Victorian wintry weather vibe, and I really like it. But this one obviously is set at Christmas time. I think it just takes that vibe that you get from all of his books to like a whole nother level, and I really like it. But I am getting a little bit tired now and I don't want to miss any of the detail, especially because it's quite a short book, so I feel like if you don't pay attention to any of the words you can miss out some like key details. So I'm gonna head to sleep now, set an early alarm for the morning, and catch up with this book as soon as I wake up. Good morning guys, so it is now Sunday morning, it's about 8 AM, although you wouldn't be able to tell that from looking outside because it is so dark this morning. Yesterday was obviously the 21st, which is like the shortest day of the year, so it kind of makes sense, but honestly I can just never get over waking up on a morning and it being so dark. I feel like I do like winter and autumn, but the one thing that I really don't like is how like little daylight hours you get, because I just feel like it's just not that nice for it to be dark all the time. But anyway, on to the readathon. I managed to finish up reading A Christmas Carol this morning and I really enjoyed this one. Obviously I managed to read the first 40 or so pages last night before going to sleep, and then I started up with it again at about 6 o'clock this morning. But yeah, I actually really enjoyed this one. Obviously it was a reread and I feel like it's the kind of book where you're already going to be familiar with the story just because there are so many like film and TV adaptations of it, but even so I think it's a really enjoyable story just because it's written in such a like vivid and captivating way. I think it just grips you immediately. I've read a couple of Charles Dickens' other books, and obviously classics in general from this era tend to be a little bit longer, and obviously they can be a little bit more long-winded, but in this one Charles Dickens managed to make it a really like fast-paced, gripping story that is just very like vivid. The imagery is so clear and I just think it really takes you into the story so well and keeps you interested right throughout. And obviously it's only just under 100 pages long, so it manages to get everything done really quickly and I really enjoyed it. So if you're looking for like a wintry classic, I definitely recommend this one just because it is so fast-paced, it does pull you in so quickly, and I just found it to be a really enjoyable read. So I think I'm probably going to give this one 4 stars altogether just because it definitely isn't like my favourite story in the world, but it was really gripping and I just liked how it was told. It's nice like super classic festive story and I just think it's a great one for this time of year. So yeah, 4 stars for this one. And then as soon as I finished up with A Christmas Carol, I moved on to book number 3 for the readathon and I picked up An Island Christmas by Jenny Colgan. I've only been reading it for about 45 minutes so far and I am really enjoying it, but I'm only about 50 pages in, so the story is kind of just getting started. But basically this book takes place on a remote Scottish island called Muir, and it's following a group of people on the island. The primary person that we're following so far is this woman called Flora, who was born and raised on the island and left for a while but then has recently come back, and she has just found out that she is pregnant but isn't sure whether her partner is going to react well to the news. And then we're also kind of following this doctor who is a Syrian refugee who now lives on the island, and he has 2 sons but his wife isn't with them, so he's kind of like troubled in that sense as well, and that's kind of where we're at so far. But it sounds like an interesting story and so far I'm really liking this like very close-knit island community. It feels like a really nice like cozy wintry thing going on and I'm just really enjoying it. But for now I'm going to go and grab some breakfast and then start reading some more after I've watched probably a few Vlogmas videos along with a cup of tea. So it's just before 11 AM and I'm now about 180 pages into An Island Christmas and I'm really enjoying this story. However, it's definitely not quite what I expected. I think obviously I mentioned earlier on that this book is basically meant to be about Flora and Safe, and that's kind of what I learned from the blurb and like the first 50 pages of the story. However, now 180 pages in, it's quite different to what I expected because I think the way the blurb set it up made me think that it was kind of going to be like a dual narrative story where you'd kind of like alternate between their 2 perspectives, but it's actually more of a like omniscient narrator style story, and to be honest it focuses a lot more on Flora than on Safe because Flora has quite a big family on the island, and so you hear a lot more about them and all of their individual stories than you do about Safe, and we're already over halfway and he is definitely the most minor of the main characters in the story. However, there is still about 150 pages left, so obviously his story might get a little bit more developed in this second half, but for now it seems like he's definitely not as big of a part as I thought he would be. But I am really enjoying the story. I think it's a nice cozy read, and it's also just really interesting because obviously it's set on this tiny Scottish island, but there are so many different types of people in the island that it just makes a really interesting story, because obviously you've kind of got like people like Flora and her family who come from the island and they're very comfortable with this very small community island lifestyle. Then you've got people like Safe who are obviously like refugees, and they're really sort of trying to acclimatise to not only like a new culture but also a new language, and just really kind of settle into this completely new way of life. And then you've also got people who are from like a Western place, like Flora's boyfriend and also her brother's husband, who are from America, but they are still kind of not necessarily as used to such a small community as the people who are from the island. So it's a really interesting mixture of characters. I just think it's making for a really intriguing story, so I'm looking forward to carrying on with this. However, I think I'm going to stop reading for a little while and do some festive baking. Now, normally my festive bake of choice would be gingerbread. However, I've been doing weekly Vlogmas videos throughout December. I've done 3 so far, and in 2 of those Vlogmas videos I've already made gingerbread. So to kind of try and mix it up a little bit and show you that I can actually bake other things, I'm going to try and make some vegan stollen, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm going to try that out because I've never made it before, but it is nice and definitely festive, so fingers crossed. So it's now just before 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which means I've got just about 6 hours left of reading time. I've obviously just been baking my stollen, or technically I haven't baked it yet, I've just been prepping the dough and everything, but whilst I've been leaving it to rise, I've also been reading more of An Island Christmas, and I'm now page 290, which means I've only got about 40 pages left to go, and this story is so gripping for me. I'm so invested in the characters. I feel like because there's such an interesting mix of characters and there's so much going on, you're constantly just being like pulled into new elements of the story, and every single bit is so gripping because I think there's just such a good mix of like light-hearted and wholesome like community elements of the story, and then some much more serious elements as well. And it's a massive emotional roller coaster, but it keeps you kind of like hooked all the way through, and I'm really enjoying it. Kind of funnily enough, after I just mentioned that Safe wasn't really as big of a part of the story, pretty much straight after that it kind of went onto his side of the story, and Flora's bit kind of took like a bit of a backseat and he became the primary character. So basically that's good because it means I've gotten a bit more of an insight into like both of those 2 primary characters, which is fun. But for now, my stollen needs to like rise for at least another hour, so Jay and I are just going to go out and get some fresh air and go for a walk, and I'll catch up and do some more reading when I get back. So it's just turned 3 o'clock, so we've got 4 hours left of the readathon, and I just finished up with book number 3, An Island Christmas, and I actually loved this book so much more than I anticipated. And I think the main reason for that is because it actually ended up being so much more serious and had a lot more depth to it than I anticipated. I picked this up kind of thinking it was just going to be another like fluffy holiday romance, kind of like Let It Snow that I read earlier, but actually there were some really serious themes interwoven with this book, and I found that they were done really effectively. And another thing that I really enjoyed about this book was that it just dealt with so many things but managed to do them all so well. So you have everything from like relationship problems and loneliness to grief and family problems and things like that, and I just think it managed all of those things together really well. And I just think it provided a very like diverse cast of characters in the sense of just like people who were from a lot of different places and going through very different things. So it just provided a very interesting and very gripping mix of characters all together in this story, and I just really liked it. But then along with all of those more serious themes, it also had those really nice sort of wholesome and just like heartwarming moments of like sort of people coming together at Christmas time, and I just think it did all of those things so well together to make a really like gripping and interesting story that did have some like definite depth to it, but was also just super cozy for this time of year. So yeah, highly recommend this one, and I think I'm probably going to give it 4 stars altogether. So with 4 hours left to go, I'm going to get started on book number 4 for this readathon, and the one that I picked out for this is a classic Christmas crime story called Portrait of a Murderer. And this is by Anne Meredith, who I can't lie, I've never actually heard of before. I picked up this book because it was just in the like Christmas section at Waterstones, and it kind of gripped me because I wanted like a classic Christmas crime story. And this one basically follows, or not necessarily follows, but is about a guy who has been murdered by one of his children on Christmas Day. So that's kind of like the mystery that the story surrounds. So I'm definitely looking forward to trying this out because I've never really read this kind of like Agatha Christie traditional crime story type genre before, so I'm looking forward to getting into it. And my Stollen is just about to come out of the oven, so I'm going to go and get that out and probably have a slice along with a cup of tea. So I've got 2 hours left of the readathon and I'm currently 85 pages into Portrait of a Murderer, and I'm not gonna lie, the reason it's taking me 2 hours to get 85 pages in is because this one is definitely a bit of a slow burner for me. It's getting like a little bit better now, but the first 50 pages were really difficult to read for me. I just found that they were a bit dull and I didn't really find myself getting invested in any of the characters. Basically, as I mentioned, the blurb basically says that it's about this guy called Adrian who is murdered by one of his children on Christmas, and basically the first 50 pages centre around giving a kind of like mini biography for each of his children and just like a bit of background about them and their lifestyle, which I found to be really dull. But then the next sort of section after that follows a bit of a closer perspective of one of the children, Brand, and at that point it starts to turn into more of a like coherent story rather than just a biography, and I found that to be a lot more like compelling and easier to get into. But one thing that I kind of noticed is that now that the story is kind of like properly getting started, is that it feels very similar to me in writing style to Robinson Crusoe, and I'm not sure if that's just in the sense of like the character Brand, who is similarly to Robinson Crusoe kind of like separated himself out from his family and is kind of like a bit downtrodden but trying to figure out a way to make something more like, I guess, outstanding about himself and that kind of thing. And then just the way that it's kind of like a very drawn out play-by-play narrative style just makes it seem very similar to Robinson Crusoe in my opinion. So we'll see how the rest of the book goes. I've got about 140 pages left to read now, so I'm just gonna get on with that because I only have 2 hours left. So it's about 5 to 7 in the evening on Sunday, and I just finished up with book number 4, Portrait of a Murderer, which I'm not gonna lie was a bit of a slog for me. This was definitely the hardest book I picked up in this 24-hour readathon, and I went into this hoping for a festive mystery like murder story type thing that would kind of be like a whodunit, and obviously the back of the book says that this guy Adrian was murdered by one of his children, so I thought it was kind of going to be a mystery surrounding which of his children did it. But rather than being a Christmas mystery, it ended up being more of a like Christmas play-by-play of events of exactly what happened and why, and I just didn't really vibe with it as much as I'd hoped. I think obviously I went into this hoping it would kind of be like an Agatha Christie type thing. I've never read Agatha Christie, but I've seen like Miss Marple and things like that on TV, and I kind of hoped it was going to be that, where a detective or someone comes in to try and figure out exactly what's happened and who has committed the crime, when actually what happens is that you find out which of his children has committed the murder very early on in the story. Then the rest of the story is just kind of other people trying to figure out what's happened, but for me at least I don't think that's as satisfying of a style for mystery, just because I think if you know what's going to happen and there isn't really any twist to come for you, it's just not really as intriguing or compelling, because yeah, other people need to find out what's going to happen, but if you already know, what's kind of keeping you hooked into the story, or at least that's the way that I felt about this one. So it was definitely a disappointment for me. I found it a little bit hard to get through, and although it was actually the second shortest book that I read today, being that it was only like 240 pages long, it felt like probably the longest, just in the sense that it was like the least enjoying for me to read, and so like turning the pages just felt like a bit of a chore. But yeah, I'm probably going to give this one 2.5 stars because it just wasn't really something that I really vibed with, and I probably wouldn't pick up a book like this again, just given how much I didn't really like this story. However, I am glad to finish Portrait of a Murderer because it now means that I have read 4 books today in my 24-hour readathon, and to be honest, I think that is my record for a 24-hour readathon because normally I manage to read like 3 and a bit books, and today I obviously finished 4. I don't think it's the most pages I've ever read because today I read a total of 1,008 festive pages of these books, and I think I've probably read more than that in a 24-hour readathon. However, I am super pleased to have read a total of 4 books today. Thought it was kind of funny to mention that obviously 2 of the books that I picked up today were ones that I had a pretty clear idea of what the books were going to be about, and then 2 were ones that I just picked up randomly because they were in the Christmas section in Waterstones and I wanted festive books. And so the first 2 books that I picked up obviously were A Christmas Carol, which was a reread for me, and then Let It Snow, which I had a pretty good idea about what it was going to be about just because it's so popular on BookTube and so many people have read it recently, so I kind of knew what I was getting with those books. And then the second 2 books that I picked up, obviously An Island Christmas and Portrait of a Murderer, were ones that I had a very little idea about what they were about, and I just thought it was kind of funny that Portrait of a Murderer ended up being my least favourite book by far, but then I absolutely loved An Island Christmas and that ended up being by far my favourite book of the readathon, so it's kind of funny how picking random books that you don't really know too much about can go one of 2 ways. Obviously, it's always good to read books on recommendations because you kind of want to read books that you're going to enjoy, but I do think sometimes it's really fun to just pick up random books and see what you think of them, and in this instance, I've had one of each sort of turn of events, but basically I think it's always fun to see which ones you're gonna like and which ones you're not gonna like, and I'm so glad that I did pick up both of those books because although I didn't love Portrait of a Murderer, I liked An Island Christmas so much that I'm super glad that I just picked it up because I hadn't heard of the author before and I'm really excited now to read more of her stuff, so I'm really glad that I did pick up those books on a whim and just sort of see what I thought of them because, you know, it's always fun to just kind of go out of your comfort zone and try new things because now I've found a new author that I absolutely love. So obviously I went on a bit of a reading sprint to try and finish off that last book in time, so I didn't really have a chance to update you on my festive baking, but I had a slice of the Stollen and oh my god, was it good. I'm so happy with how it turned out. I absolutely loved it. Whenever I try and say Stollen, I start getting all of my other S words confused because I want to say the sh sound, but it gets all confused and I don't know which words are normal S's and which ones are German. But anyway, the Stollen was incredible and I'm really glad that I decided to make it because, as I said, I usually make gingerbread as my go-to festive bake, but today I thought I'd try something different and it turned out to be another instance where trying something out of your comfort zone is a good thing because I loved the Stollen and I cannot wait to eat more of it later because I made a huge loaf of it and now I'm just going to be digging into that for the rest of this Christmas week because it is so good. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing all of my thoughts on the festive books that I picked up in this Christmas 24-hour readathon, and I hope you've also enjoyed seeing all of the fun festive activities I've tried to jam into the last 24 hours as well. But if you've read any of the books that I've picked up, do let me know your thoughts down below because I'd love to hear whether you felt the same about them as me or if you had different thoughts. And if you've had any other festive books that you've picked up recently, let me know about them as well because although I probably won't get to them this December, I'll definitely want to read some more festive books next Christmas, so I'll add them to my TBR very prematurely and try and get round to them next December. But I hope you've enjoyed this Christmassy festive 24-hour readathon. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.